Hello and welcome back to the Hindu's coverage of US elections 2024. We said it was D-Day. We didn't know whether the results would be out, but they are in fact out today. It does seem, by all accounts, that Donald Trump, the Republican candidate, the US's 45th president, will now also be its 47th president. This is only the second time in history, in US history, that a president has won two non-consecutive terms. So win, lose, and then come back. We have, of course, a full panel here to discuss what that victory means for the world, for our region, and of course, for India. Particularly the bilateral relationship. So let me just quickly tell you who our very, very full and esteemed panel is. Dr. Srinivasan V, our data guru, is coming back. You heard him in the morning. Also joining us a bit later is International Affairs Editor, Dr. Stanley Johnny. Kallol Bhattacherjee, he's an author of Nehru's First Recruits, also The Great Game in Afghanistan. He's also Senior Assistant Editor on Foreign Affairs here at The Hindu. And we will be joined by Dinakar Peri, Senior Assistant Editor on Defense Issues. We have two special guests. Arun Kumar Singh, he's a former Indian ambassador to the United States. He was also India's ambassador to France. He's been writing about the relationship for a number of reputed institutions. And I'm very pleased to welcome on the show Husain Haqqani. He joins us from Abu Dhabi. He's a senior fellow at the US Hudson Institute, but now at the Anwar Gargash Diplomatic Academy there. And he was Pakistan's ambassador to the United States for 3 years, 2008 to 2011. Very, very dynamic times those were. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining me here on the show this afternoon. It isn't a woman who won the election there in the US. And we do see a lot of men on our panel here today. But first, let me just tell our viewers exactly what has happened so far. If you look at the Associated Press, which is what we are looking at through the day for you here, we see that there isn't yet a full call of the vote. Remember, they are still waiting on a few different seats to come, and Donald Trump is still at 267. Remember, he needs 270 to officially cross the halfway mark. Kamala Harris at 224. This vote will be actually possibly a worse performance than Biden did in 2020. And you can see the spread of the of all the states over there, because of course America has this peculiar electoral vote system. What is interesting is that for the first time in 2 decades, Trump has also won the popular vote. If you look up at that graphic over there, Trump is ahead 51.1%, so about 4%, 4 points ahead of Kamala Harris on the popular vote. And remember, no Republican, even if a Republican has won the electoral vote, they've not won the popular vote for at least 2 decades now. There's another interesting nugget of a first, which is that Mr. Trump is the first to win 2 consecutive terms since the 1800s. So former President Grover Cleveland did that in the late 1800s. And of course, it is unusual because he has defeated now not 1, but 2 women who hope to have become the first woman president of the United States, Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris. And of course, for his detractors, they will point out he is possibly the president with the most amount of criminal cases against him. There are 4 cases in particular, one which will see sentencing later this month. As president last time, he was impeached twice, but none of it has mattered. So clearly, a very good night this evening for Donald Trump in particular. Let's just take a look at what he said when he addressed his supporters a short while ago.
For the extraordinary honor of being elected your 47th president and your 45th president. And every citizen, I will fight for you, for your family, and your future. Every single day I will be fighting for you, and with every breath in my body, I will not rest until we have delivered the strong, safe, and prosperous America that our children deserve and that you deserve. This will truly be the golden age of America. That's what we have to have.
Trump there promising a golden age for America. Later, he spoke about the importance of liquid gold or oil. And we do want to come to our panelists to ask what that was all about, as well as a massive plug for SpaceX chief, Twitter owner Elon Musk, and the possibility that he may come on as some kind of a technological advisor for President Trump in the future. But I want to go around to our panel and begin just by throwing it open to ask, what does this result really say about the US voter? Many had called it a dead heat. It's clear it is no longer a dead heat. Husain Haqqani, give me a sense of your first reaction really to the fact that while the race is still being called, we're about three electoral votes short of a definitive victory, that this was really not as close as the polls had said they would be.
Absolutely. And what it shows is that a large number of Americans are unhappy with their lives. And that is why they are looking at somebody whom they have tried before. And this is exactly what happened with Grover Cleveland, who got the non-consecutive term. The second time he was elected was because people were not happy with the Republican whom he had lost to. So basically, it is a vote against the status quo. Trump has been in office before. How different will his term be this time? I'm not too sure. He will have similar constraints and problems. He is a boisterous personality. He has a tremendous ability to generate news about himself. A lot of people who didn't want him to win were people who were hoping that we will settle to calmer times. And quite clearly, a lot of Americans don't feel that way. The one big shift in the electorate is the shift in the Latino voters. And I have a feeling that that is what I call the third-class compartment in a subcontinental train, that kind of effect. That those who manage to squeeze into the train then want to block others from coming into the train. So they probably, the immigration message resonated with them. But I think another dimension was that the left-wing young intelligentsia that is coming from universities, that is making issues of things that a lot of socially conservative Americans are not easy with. That made a lot of people unsettled. So it's a kind of an anti-woke vote. People don't like those issues. And there's a continuum going back to President Obama. A lot of Americans have actually wanted America to retrench its external commitment. So that there is a continuation. I think President Biden went back on that. He differed from President Obama in terms of engaging with the world, because that was what he was comfortable with. But the average American is not comfortable with that.
Right. I want to get to our Hindu panel as well. But first, let me just put out there what Prime Minister Modi said. Of course, leaders across the world have already sent in their congratulations to Donald Trump. And of course, using Twitter over there, which is what Prime Minister Modi did as well, quite shortly, a quarter to two, actually. So more than an hour and a bit ago, Prime Minister Modi had tweeted, "Heartiest congratulations to my friend, Donald Trump, on your historic election victory. As you build on the successes of your previous term, I look forward to renewing our collaboration." So Prime Minister Modi getting up there along, before possibly a lot of other leaders and making that point. Stanley, Johnny, I want to come to you next and just ask that question. What kind of an impact? Because here's Prime Minister Modi already harking back to Trump 1.0. Trump 1.0 was known for, of course, many different forays on the international stage that Mr. Trump made, but it was also known for that morning tweet you would wake up with that would decide your news cycle for the day almost. What do you think about a Trump 2.0 now?
Yeah, it would be interesting if you look at it from the foreign policy perspective of a Trump 2.0. So we have some indications where Trump is headed to when it comes to the critical foreign policy questions. For example, when it comes to the Ukraine war, I mean, if you look at the two most important developments that defined the Biden presidency, one was the Ukraine war and the other was the war in West Asia, the Israel-Palestine conflict, Israel's war on Gaza. So when it comes to the Ukraine war, both Trump and his vice president, they have articulated a position that is different from the Biden-Harris administration's position. Because Biden's position was that the United States would continue to back Ukraine, and Biden himself said that as long as it takes. Whereas Trump and Vance's proposal apparently suggested that Ukraine has to freeze the conflict where it is now, which means Ukraine has to cede territories and in return for peace. When it comes to West Asia, we know that Trump was a pro-Israel president when he was in power. It was Trump who moved America's embassy to Jerusalem. And it was Trump who recognized Israeli annexation of Syria's Golan Heights. And it was when Trump was the president, the United States unilaterally withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal. But at the same time, Trump also says, at least in the run-up to the elections, Trump said that he wants the war on Gaza to be over by the time he comes to office. On what conditions, we don't know. We don't know what policy he is going to take, because there is a clear distinction here. With regard to Ukraine, he has articulated his position clearly. But when it comes to West Asia, he has maintained that ambivalence, because he also knew that he has to win over the voters who were increasingly unhappy with Biden administration's policy towards Israel's war. So he maintained that ambivalence. But a couple of points, if we look at Trump's statements, Trump said that he will end inflation. Inflation was a big issue in the United States. He promised his voters that he will end inflation, and his base, this voters' base, is they are opposed to America getting involved in conflicts in West Asia and other places. So where Trump is going to draw the red line is something which we have to look forward to, because he might support Israel's continuing war on Gaza, but at the same time, I think the United States being drawn into another conflict in West Asia, especially with regard to Iran, would not be a desirable outcome even for a Trump administration. So I think these are the two important points. And when it comes to India, I think it is important to look at where India-US relationship is going to head to, especially at this point of time, because there are tensions in India's relationship with the United States. One is, of course, there were issues with regard to India's position towards the Russian-Ukraine war. But if Trump manages to bring the war to an end, that would actually remove an important pressure point. But at the same time, there are issues with regard to the allegations India is facing about the assassination attempt on Khalistan, extremists in the United States, or the assassination allegations in Canada. So there are other pressure points that I think we have to see what position Trump is going to take. But right. Yes, I think Trump's position vis-a-vis Russian conflict, if Trump manages to bring the war to an end, that will actually remove an important pressure point from Indo-US relationship.
Certainly, and it's worth remembering that when Trump 1.0, he was able to get India to cancel all its oil imports from Iran and from Venezuela. That's not something the Biden administration was able to do in the past 4 years. And now with the pressure on Russia coming down a bit, it might open the way for a little more, perhaps, happy relationship. Kallol, I'd like to bring you in. Trump tweeting just a few days ago on the occasion of Diwali, but he made it really an attack on the government in Bangladesh, where he clearly targeted the government in Bangladesh for not being able to protect Hindu minorities there. It's also known that he is not a fan of Professor Muhammad Yunus in the kind of way we saw Professor Yunus with the Democrats in New York, even just a month ago or so. What do you see really as Trump's imprint in South Asia, if you like, but in particular with Bangladesh and India ties in the next 4 years?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the famous link between Muhammad Yunus and the Clinton Foundation, and especially Hillary Clinton, these are absolute indications that Donald Trump will not feel very comfortable interacting with the interim government in Dhaka at present. And already some of the ex-bureaucrats, the former diplomats of the State Department who have been among the most vociferous supporters of Muhammad Yunus's government have started to tweet indicating that probably Trump will respect the interim government because it is the outcome of a public or a popular upsurge against Sheikh Hasina's government. So these are interesting signs that Trump has not forgotten history, and moreover, his comment about the protection of the minority rights, that is Hindus, Christians, and Buddhists, is really a clear indication that Trump will look at South Asia a little differently. I would also add that there is a very obvious sign that Elon Musk's technology plans probably are also an indicator that Trump administration will look at the enormous technology market that South Asia and Southeast Asia has to offer. I mean, if you look at what's happening inside Myanmar today, it's a well-known thing that there is a huge conflict going on inside Myanmar. But that conflict has also given opportunity for Elon Musk's Starlink to be used very extensively inside Myanmar. So as soon as you cross the Indian border and you enter Myanmar, you basically enter the realm of Starlink. And whereas Starlink is not yet available to the Indian customers, at least in the Indian market in a legitimate manner. So there is again the push that we can expect that there will be an enormous push from the tech czars of Trump administration.
Right. I certainly, and the idea that business interests will be put first. Let's also remember that while Trump really did open a lot of the technological ties with India, gave India what was called STA1 authorization, a really high level of authorization status for tech transfers. He was also the president who withdrew India's GSP status, meant needed for our exporters. Let me bring in Dinakar Peri. And Dinakar, you follow this so closely. In the last year, we certainly saw the Biden administration really stepping up to the plate, if you like, in terms of technology relations with India, the tech transfer of a fighter engine coming for a fighter aircraft as well as so many other areas. Do you see any of the, if you like, remainder of Trump's own projects from Trump 1.0 that may be taken forward?
From a technology point of view, yes, I think the larger trend will, from the defense and security cooperation, will probably remain the same in a bilateral sense. But it's actually what we have to see is, one, the trade issues, immigration trade issues, two, the global issues. Those will have actually bearing on this. So that's going to be how we navigate that. No, a couple of things you said about the technology transfer. So everything has a cost. So what is the price we have to pay?
And certainly we will expect that Trump, unlike perhaps other leaders that India has had to deal with in the last couple of years, is going to push for that price point, correct?
So it's about finding the medium.
Come back to you.
Ukraine, for example.
Sorry?
So even Ukraine, for instance, how Trump decides to go forward in Ukraine, the manner of it is going to put India in a tricky spot in balancing its own take on Europe. So I'll just get back.
Sure, certainly. And we will come back to you. Earlier, I, in fact, put some of these questions about where Indian foreign policy should be looking with a Trump 2.0 coming in. I spoke to India's former ambassador to the United States, Arun Kumar Singh. He's worked also with Carnegie India, also with the German Marshall Fund. And I asked him about how India really should see this turn of events in the United States. Listen in. Me now is Ambassador Arun Kumar Singh. He was ambassador to the United States in 2015 and 2016. How do you see the Trump win, Mr. Singh?
I think whoever won, the relationship was likely to consolidate. We had some positive elements in the Trump 1.0. Negative aspects, including on trade-related issues. But Trump had taken several steps indicating that he saw advantage in the relationship and wanted to consolidate it. One, he had placed India on STA level 1, Strategic Trade Authorization level 1 in 2018, enabling highest level of technology releases. During the Galwan conflict in 2020, US had shared information, intelligence, had leased 2 drones to India, and had also shared winter clothing that was urgently required by armed forces who were moving to that area. In a manner different from past administrations, including the Obama administration, during one of Prime Minister's visit in the joint statement, there was a reference to the US now allowing the sale to India of armed drones, which the US was earlier reluctant to do. So I think those were the positive elements.
And there are also things that India should brace for. One is the morning tweet that might decide the news agenda for the day. Mr. Trump used his morning social media to talk about things like trade tariff barriers, his unhappiness with India on a number of issues there, his withdrawal of India's GSP status, his really persistent pressure that ensured India cancelled all its oil imports from Iran and Venezuela. Of course, now we have the Russia-Ukraine war and the Israel-Gaza war. How do you really see Trump 2.0? Is it going to be more or less like Trump 1.0?
So I think the broad approach will be the same. But again, if you look at the books that some of the people who have worked very closely with him, former national security advisors, McMaster, Bolton, his decision-making was chaotic. It was unpredictable, going back and forth. So one should be prepared for that. But that having been said, some of what he has been projecting from before, to some extent, he's been consistent. On Russia, he's been less adversarial than the Democrats have been. So one can't rule out that he may have the political capital to bring to an end the active phase of the conflict. I don't think the issues can be resolved. But if the active phase of the conflict is brought to an end, that will not be unhelpful from India's point of view. Because then the India-Russia relationship will not come under the same kind of an adversarial gaze. So I think that would be one. We'll have to see what he does in West Asia, because he has been even more supportive of Israel than the Biden administration has been. He said publicly that Netanyahu should go ahead and do what he wants. He moved the US embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, which no administration had done. He unilaterally recognized Israeli sovereignty over Golan Heights, which again no US administration had done. And just today, the Israeli Prime Minister has fired his defense minister, who was seen as the more moderating voice. So does he really restrain some of the action that Israel is taking on the ground, or gives Israel political cover? He may probably want to take a harder stance on Iran. Now, what does that mean for the Israel-Iran dynamic, and what does it mean for the Iran-Arab country dynamic? He's the one who had pushed through the Abraham Accords in 2020. Is he once again able to bring these countries together for a cooperative relationship with Israel, despite what's happening on the ground? So I think these are question marks, and we don't really know the answers to this.
Yeah, and of course, the next few days will, probably months, will tell us much more. Arun Singh, thanks so much for speaking to us at The Hindu.
Thank you.
All right. And in fact, the next question really is about our other neighbor, India's other neighbor, Pakistan. And I'm so happy that you could join us, Husain. Give us a sense, firstly, of how the news that Trump is back is going to be seen in Pakistan.
Well, it's very interesting. Pakistanis have, over the years, become a very inward-looking country. A lot of things they look at primarily through the lens of their domestic politics, which has both a positive and a negative side to it. But the PTI supporters of Imran Khan, have been fed the message over the last few months that a Trump victory would ensure Imran Khan's release from prison, because Trump looks upon him as a friend. So they are all elated. They are very happy. Some people who are on the side of the government are concerned, just in case what the PTI people are saying turns out to be true. The Pakistani establishment was fully prepared for both a Trump or a Harris victory in the election. Here's the bottom line. Pakistan does not rank very high in either President Trump's priorities or would have done in a Kamala Harris administration either. And Pakistanis have yet to come to terms with that. There might be less pressure on human rights and related issues on Pakistan. There might be even less interest in Pakistan because there is nothing in the region apart from India that interests President Trump. Could a deterioration in relations between China and the United States impact Pakistan because of its close ties? One of those variables that Ambassador Arun Singh was talking about, because we really do not know how Trump might react to any issue. Remember, he went through several secretaries of state in his last term, several national security advisors, none of whom supported them in this election, partly because they think his understanding of world politics is more instinctive rather than sophisticated. So yes, there are people he likes, and he likes Prime Minister Modi. We don't know whom he likes in Pakistan, if he does. So I don't think that it will be a high priority. Pakistanis will have to come to terms with that reality, which I don't think many have.
Well, certainly it has been interesting in the last few years, because what we did see was while Mr. Trump invited Imran Khan to the White House after having cancelled all Pakistan's funding, so kind of yo-yo in a sense, but he had a very warm conversation with Mr. Khan. But subsequently, when the Biden administration came, they had no truck with Imran Khan at all. I don't think Mr. Biden and Mr. Khan.
Neither did Mr. Trump, actually. It was a one-off, Suhasini.
Right.
Lindsey Graham, the senator from South Carolina, had met Prime Minister Khan at that time. He came back and he told Trump that I met the guy in Pakistan and he's a bit like you. And so Trump said, oh, if somebody is like me, they must be good. Bring them over. And he came. But if you think about it in policy terms, after the meeting with Imran Khan, what really changed? Trump, by definition, is not pro-aid. So Pakistan's aid was not going to increase. Trump wanted to get out of Afghanistan and didn't want to do it under any arrangement that benefited Pakistan or anybody else. So that also didn't come out to Pakistan's advantage. And Trump sees India as the larger market for US products, and any pressures it puts about trade are going to be on India rather than on Pakistan, with whom bilateral US trade is only about $9 billion. So it's more an illusion, because yes, Trump did meet Imran Khan and Biden did not. But in reality, in the substance of policy, very frankly, the interest of the US government in Pakistan started more with the election of Donald Trump than with the election of Joe Biden.
And it must be said, this is when Trump comes back to power, things have changed in Afghanistan. When he was president, he, amongst other things that he did, and the Doha Accord certainly happened during his tenure, was a very, very strange plan, if you like, to bring both the Taliban and President Ghani to Camp David in order to sign this agreement with them. It was aborted at the very last minute by his advisors. The question really, will Afghanistan's regime fare any better, or will he just completely ignore them?
Look, in his mind, he has a very Eurocentric mind, and he's not very knowledgeable about the world, is not a widely traveled person, primarily Europe and North America. And as president, he went to certain places, came to India as well. But he does think that China had... What's his problem with China? It's not ideology. It's not communism. It is trade. He says China takes unfair advantage of America. So basically, he is singularly focused on a very protectionist economic agenda. And Afghanistan doesn't fit into that. And now terrorism, yes. But then there too, he would be a a source of concern for Donald Trump. But there too, his response is going to be muscular. Remember, he's the kind of guy who would say, you know what, okay, he will authorize strikes to kill people if he thinks that they are threatening America in any way, if the intelligence comes to that. But other than that, I don't think he's going to get bogged down with issues that he thinks did not help the American economy, because that is what it is all about.
I do want to ask also about where he will go. You know, one of the things of Trump 1.0 was the retrenchment of America in several spheres. So America walked out of the Paris Climate Accords. It walked out of the Iran JCPOA deal. Trump walked out of UNESCO. He walked out of the UN Human Rights Commission, at least the US did. He also threatened to walk out of institutions like WTO, but most importantly, NATO. Now that he is back, do you see him follow that kind of very sort of America first, retrentionist, if you like, sort of policy? Or do you see him having learned a little bit in the last 4 years about that?
First of all, if anyone ever asked me to bet on a man at age 70 plus learning something, I would sort of, hold my breath. Joe Biden didn't learn anything after becoming president. In fact, everything he had learned before is all he kept putting into practice, which is why he got certain things wrong. So I don't think Trump is going to be any different. And moreover, we must remember he's not a person who goes by expert advice or even professional advice from what he calls the deep state in the United States, the intelligence community or anybody. He goes by his instincts. And his instincts are anti-NATO. He believes that everybody in the world has taken advantage. He doesn't understand the American post-Cold War strategy of building others up as a way of securing America. He thinks that that actually was at the expense of America. Very frankly, if he had been elected president in 1948, I doubt if there would have been a Marshall Plan. I doubt if there would have been a NATO. He would have said, we beat them, let's just have a party at home. And that's what it's all about. Let's try and a lot of voters seem to agree with him. A lot of Americans say, spend on us, don't spend on the military, don't spend on protecting other countries. How that fares in a world that has become accustomed to America being the net security provider, Japan, South Korea, Europe, they're all going to feel the pressure. And I don't think he's going to change much now. The only thing is that the kind of drastic changes he wants may not be possible in 4 years. And their fruit may not be born within 4 years, which is why he lost last time, because people didn't benefit as much. So like anybody in Wisconsin who thinks if we get out of NATO, the price of cheese produced in Wisconsin will become better, and therefore I will have a happier life going forward, he or she is going to be disappointed.
Certainly. Husain, you're there in the UAE. So I do have to ask, one of Trump's legacies from 1.0 that really is floundering now is the Abraham Accords. Even if Trump seeks to go back and try and restore them in some way, and most importantly, try and restore relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel, which I think the Crown Prince has just yesterday said is not a possibility unless there is a future of Palestine, of the Palestinian state is discussed. Do you think Trump will be as successful this time around? What do you see as the future really of the US's policy towards the Gulf and West Asia, given, here in India, we're watching very closely to see what the future perhaps of the India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor would be. Where do you see that whole situation going?
Look, he's for everything that is good for America. And so a India, Middle East, Europe corridor could be good for America in his view. But if it involves spending any money by the United States, he's against it. Similarly, he likes the Arab Gulf countries, and he thinks that they are better partners than the more complicated larger Arab country, more populated Arab countries. And the Abraham Accords appealed to him. The idea that Arab countries will make peace with Israel with American support in return, eventually for a Palestinian state being created. The only problem there is the one person who is his favorite leader outside of the United States, Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu's understanding of the Abraham Accords was not that the understanding of everybody else getting on board with the Abraham Accords, including the Americans. Netanyahu saw it as a way of normalizing with Arab countries by bypassing the Palestinian issue. And that is not going to work, especially in the post-Gaza environment. No Arab country wants to move forward with relations with Israel without some assurance of a better life for the Palestinians. Would Donald Trump be able to deliver that? If he does, he's going to be a hero to many, many Arabs and Muslims around the world. Experience tells us that an intransigent leader in Israel is very difficult for an American leader to persuade, coax, cajole, or coerce.
Well, certainly wouldn't perhaps be easier for Donald Trump than any of the others who are in the reckoning. But Husain Haqqani, it's always such a pleasure to speak with you and gain from your insights. Thank you so much for speaking to us here at The Hindu.
Thank you.
All right. I do want to, if you're just joining us, go back to where the American elections are at present. And if we can pull up the AP map, I will tell you where we see, we're still waiting, of course, for AP, the Associated Press in the United States that really collates all the information to declare a winner. And one of the reasons they have not been able to do so far is because Donald Trump is 3 short of the 270, which is the halfway mark for elections. He's still at 267. Of course, it sounds a lot like the Indian elections in a sense. Our halfway mark is 272, but it is actually a very different system. Srini, you're still with us. How different has this election been in terms of how it turned out? Many of us thought that perhaps we wouldn't even have a result this early in the game and we'd be waiting days, if not weeks, for a definitive count of the vote to come in. Srini?
Yeah, most pollsters were saying this is going to be a dead heat, and in terms of the swing states going to determine who is going to win, and the vote share terms, they were expecting that Mr. Trump would fall short. But what has transpired is that he's now projected to win the popular vote, but perhaps he'll get a percentage point more than Kamala Harris, and this would be the first time since 2004 that a Republican candidate would actually win the popular vote. That's number one. Number two, as things stand, he seems to be winning all the swing states, all 7 of the swing states. The expectation was that, the pollsters were saying that there would be a dichotomy between the Rust Belt and the Sun Belt. That is the states in the Midwest. If Trump wins those, there would be a chance for Kamala Harris to fight back by winning 1 or 2 of the Sun Belt states. That is Georgia, North Carolina, Nevada, and Arizona. But instead, what has transpired is that he's in line to win all of the 7 swing states. 3 have been declared so far. The crucial one, the largest, the state with the largest number of electoral votes, Pennsylvania, has already been projected to have been won by Trump. So that ensures that he's now on a definite path to victory. There are still some votes to be counted in Michigan and in Wisconsin, Nevada, and of course Arizona. But as things stand, there is very little possibility for Kamala Harris to mop up any of the remaining votes to upend Mr. Trump. I suppose within probably as soon as dawn breaks in the US, the agencies will call the election for Mr. Trump. The other important thing Mr. Haqqani himself pointed out is that exit polls were also pretty close, calling it a close election, but actual results don't seem to be panning out the way the exit polls determined it. But there were some nuggets from the exit polls that could make us understand why this election went Mr. Trump's way. One was, of course, Hispanics breaking out in larger numbers to vote for Mr. Trump. One exit poll by NBC News said that 53% of those polled were supporting Ms. Harris, while 41%, or rather 41% were supporting Mr. Trump. And this gap has narrowed dramatically from what it was during 2020. The other thing is that the Hispanics seem to have supported Mr. Trump not just in states where they were expected to, such as Florida, which had decisively moved towards the Republican kitty in the last few years. That's because the Cuban Americans, for example, have been traditionally supporting Republicans, and a lot of conservative minded Hispanics had moved over to Florida. But this is the Hispanic support seems to be driving Mr. Trump's numbers in states which have been decisively blue in the recent years, such as New Jersey also. I'm looking at New Jersey data, and it's telling me that Kamala Harris is ahead only by 5 percentage points, and that's a huge jump for Mr. Trump, because in 2020 in New Jersey, Biden was leading Trump by 17 percentage points. So there are some warning bells for the Democrats. Their blue wall that they had built and which had broken. Which had broken in a way in 2016 when Miss Hillary Clinton was contesting election, is now has been shattered in the Midwest, and now the Republicans are gaining even in places like New Jersey, and that's reflected in the Senate and the House elections as well. Shall we discuss that now, or?
Yeah, no, in fact, when you were saying that, there's a lot for the Democrats to think about, it's not just the presidential election, it's the fact that they've lost control of the Senate, and how, because the Senate, you normally had a much closer race, and therefore you were able to push some votes through. Now it's a 42-51 in favor of the Republicans. The House as well, we're seeing that kind of shift. Governors who we're looking at around the country now, at 27 Republican governors to 23, all that it's adding up to will mean not just will it be very much easier for Donald Trump to pass legislation, but also to pick judicial candidates for the future. We've already seen the kind of lasting impact his previous term had on the judiciary when it came to things like the Roe v. Wade abortion rights judgment. What is this really going to mean? And give us a sense really of where those Senate votes are.
Yeah, so as you said, the Republicans are going to gain the Senate. And in the last two election cycles, they were just short of winning majority in the Senate. And the Senate also was some kind of even though the Republicans controlled the House, and the House Republicans were also increasingly radical, the Senate could veto some of the radical legislations that were being passed by the House. And that kind of veto power will not exist now if the Senate moves towards the Republicans as well. And we also know that conservatives have a 6-3 majority in the Supreme Court as well. So this is a decisive election for Republicans and conservatives in the United States. From a progressive point of view, this is also dangerous because trackers, or rather academics who had tracked the nature of democracy in the United States during the Trump era had said that there was backsliding during his tenure. And if you notice that the different institutions of Congress, Supreme Court, and the presidency now going to be controlled by Republicans and conservatives, then we can expect further backsliding, because this version of the Republican Party seems to have less tolerance for institutional, institutional autonomy. And even during the time when Mr. Trump was not the president, he had a great say in the way the House conducted matters. And now that he's the president, you can expect more of a Trump-controlled, legislature. And this does not bode well for American democracy.
Do we know? Is it too early to tell, Srini? Because we have a question from one of our readers, Jaideep, who's asking, what about Michigan? The question about the Israel-Gaza war. Is it too early to tell whether, in fact, Michigan turned red because of that Gaza factor?
I think so. There is clearly, let's put it this way. While Mr. Trump always had a high floor, and the Republican Party united, and strongly to vote for Mr. Trump, despite, neocons and others actually siding with Ms. Harris, there was a much more clear fracture that happened after the Gaza war among Democrats, right? One of the reasons why I think Kamala Harris did not choose Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro as a running mate was that she wanted to, kind of reassure some of the progressives who were very dismayed with the Biden administration in the way it supported Israeli actions in Gaza, and by taking a Jewish and a pro-Israeli governor as a running mate, she did not want to alienate that section even further. But that said, Ms. Harris's positions did not really enthuse those Democrats, not just Arab Americans, but also progressive Americans and also young voters who were very dismayed with the way the US was continuing to fund or even sell weapons to Israel, which were used in the military actions in Gaza, which have definitely killed a lot of civilians. I'm pretty sure that many of them either did not vote, either did not turn out to vote for the Democratic Party, or were dismayed enough to even vote for Mr. Trump, knowing the fact that Mr. Trump was was clearly more pro-Israel. But I suppose they saw it this way, that how worse could it get, and they wanted to punish the Democrats for the Biden administration for doing what it did.
Internally seem to have been for Kamala Harris. Before I let you go, Srini, I do want to ask you, you're there in Chennai. In a sense, this was a battle for the South. There's Kamala Harris, her mother, Shyamala Gopalan from Tamil Nadu. There's Usha Chilukuri, who's the wife of the now Vice President-elect J.D. Vance from Andhra Pradesh, although I think some of her family also lived in Chennai. Was there an extra bit of interest, if you like, in Chennai, in the South, because of this election?
Yes, definitely. In the Tamil news channels especially, there's a lot of talk about Ms. Harris's candidacy. And there was a lot of expectation that she would, break that, glass ceiling that has eluded American women. And the expectation was that an erudite former prosecutor who also had substantial experience in both administration as well as who went on to become vice president would be a good challenger to Mr. Trump. But unfortunately, that didn't happen, and that would have certainly dismayed a lot of people here who wanted someone from who shared roots with them to get to the presidency. And I believe, not to directly answer your question, but to go on a tangent on something else. I believe the Democrats made a mistake by allowing Mr. Joe Biden to withdraw rather late, and that did not help them at all. Mr. Trump, started to dominate the airwaves when Mr. Biden did pretty badly, pretty poorly in the first presidential debate, and it was always difficult for Ms. Harris to play catch up since then. There were 2 assassination attempts as well. One was almost successful, and that ensured that the Republicans galvanized strongly behind Mr. Trump. And these 2 things, the fact that Biden withdrew quite late, and then Trump had to face two assassination attempts. This actually galvanized support much more strongly for him, and made it difficult for the Democrats.
Certainly a Herculean effort to, within 2 or 3 months, generate the kind of campaign that others have had months and months, if not years, to prepare for. Srinivasan Ramani, I'm going to let you go, but thanks so much for joining us with all that data crunching. and the scene of the South in India for the moment at least. They don't have a president of the United States from there. It just means that the electorate in the US is not ready yet for a woman. Kamala Harris would have been a first in many ways, but now it looks very clear that it's Donald Trump who has the path to victory. I want to go back now to our correspondents to discuss, really, for the last bit of our show, talk about India and how Indian foreign policy could really be affected with this Trump 2.0. Obviously, the bonhomie at the top between the two leaders, very tight. We read out for you Prime Minister Modi's tweet. It was almost a very personal tweet for his friend Donald Trump, who has won. He was not able to meet him when he traveled to the US in September this year, although Donald Trump had said that he was planning to meet him. But it is very clear that the two leaders will meet probably in 2025 itself, because India will be hosting the Quad Summit, and Donald Trump would be invited to that. I want to start with you, Kallol, and ask that basic question: when the Ministry of External Affairs looks at win by Donald Trump, is it essentially a positive win? External Affairs Minister Jaishankar has said no matter who would win, India-US relations would only grow. But is the fact that it is Trump, a known entity and a known entity who has had good relations in the past, a positive thing?
Well, if we compare 2024, the first arrival of Trump, we may actually remember there was a certain amount of directionless in New Delhi when Trump arrived for the first time. And some of the people that who visited, the American, or if we can even call them officials or rather representatives from the Trump camp, were the likes of Shalabh Kumar, Manasvi Mamgai, who was a former beauty queen. And the biggest visits from the Trump administration were actually his daughter, that's Ivanka, who was hosted in Hyderabad, and then, of course, I think Nikki Haley, who was hosted here. So those were really some sort of big show and big pomp kind of a visit. But in comparison to that, when we see the Biden administration's visitors, they were very low-key, rather private visits and very confidential visits by the top bureaucrats. So there was a certain amount of formality and a certain amount of use of formal bureaucratic structure when it came to Biden administration in comparison to the way the Trump administration utilized them in the first tenure of Donald Trump. But now when we look at the second tenure of Donald Trump, I feel that, as the tweet from the Prime Minister has indicated, that now they have certain amount of familiarity with the person, with the leader. He has already visited India once. He has already addressed a press conference in New Delhi before, and therefore there is a certain amount of familiarity and bonhomie, the kind of photographs that were used by the Indian Prime Minister, including the photograph from the Houston rally where Indian Prime Minister had talked about Ab Ki Baar Trump Sarkar, which, by the way, was missing when he visited New York just a few months ago, as the U.S. electorate was getting ready for election. So all these use of photographs and etc. also are indicating that perhaps there is a sense of greater sense of ease in New Delhi as far as dealing with Trump 2.0 is concerned. And I think now apart from obviously there is a certain amount of discomfort in the bureaucracy of the United States because Trump has made several statements about what he calls the swamp. But we really have to see whether Trump utilizes some of the bureaucrats who have been very active on the India front in the last 4 years, or would he use his own family members as he used in the first term?
Right, and we did see visits to India by Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner in lieu, actually, of representatives, as you had pointed out. Dinakar, it has been missed by nobody that a deal between India and China on the line of actual control came just prior to this election. As Mr. Trump comes back, is he expected to be much tougher on China, and how will India really see that? Will that be a good thing?
I guess that's the real question. We all see the two things which probably the world will look forward is one, Trump stand on Ukraine, because that actually will change the entire dynamics for the region, Europe, and NATO. See, in fact, there was a question on NATO, which
From Aniket
Trump-
Chauhan, yeah.
yes. So which Trump had said in the past will pull out. But the question is, in that sense, in the last 4 years, Europe in some ways has actually upped its own military preparedness. If you see, because of, again, as a fallout of the war in Ukraine, they're now spending a lot. They're trying to Europe is trying to rearm itself. So in that sense, probably that's, that gives a little better bargaining chip for Europe with Trump. But the question is, what about Ukraine? How will that pan out? That's again everyone's real question. So that's something we'll all have to watch out for. The second is, of course, China. So if you again go back to Trump's previous presidency, despite a divided opinion, Trump did take some strong measures, and especially now with the tech backing that Trump has. So how is that going to pan out? I mean, because now increasingly the conflict is actually in the tech domain, cyberspace, and the airwaves, AI, all those sectors where China has actually made significant gains in the last few years. Is literally kind of the chips, in all those the high tech sectors. So how is that going to pan out? Especially because Trump has the backing. One is Elon Musk, and also the whole tech circuit, which has kind of in a way pitched. So how is that going to play out? And it has implications for India, because we are also trying to get out of technology, the Quad dependency, supply chain resilience. So that's something which we will actually pay a cost. So that's something we'll
be watching very closely.
Yes.
In the last 4 years, particularly as the Galwan clashes and the standoff at the LAC prolonged itself, in a sense, we have seen India come closer to the US on the maritime sphere. And you mentioned the Quad, but in terms of not just working together in exchanges, now there are Coast Guard exchanges off the Quad itself that have been agreed to. There is also a new kind of militarization of the Indo-Pacific, perhaps not India specific, but things like AUKUS, the US's own outreaches to countries like South Korea, to Vietnam, and others, particularly looking at a possible crisis in Taiwan. How do you see India and the US's possible cooperation in Trumpian times, if you like, going forward in the Indo-Pacific?
So again, as you mentioned, there are a lot of regional initiatives which now India and US have embarked on. So as my sense is, India will be asked to do more. Bringing in capital, spending in more of its expertise, doing more in multiple ways. That I think will be something we have to be, India has to be braced for, to do more, because we have been reluctant. We have been, in some ways, we actually have put our foot out and said, no, we won't do it. We have certain red lines, overtly doing certain things. But that's something probably we'll have to take a call and, maneuver around. That will probably be a foreign policy challenge we'll have to look forward to. Maintaining that our red lines were also showing Trump that we are doing something, contributing something in serious.
Right. And Dinakar, if I can quickly ask you, there are all these deals that were agreed to last year in June when Prime Minister Modi went to Washington, specifically to buy things. I know there's a drone deal that just got signed. What are the first few military and defense cooperation agreements that you're expecting to see go through in a Trumpian time?
I guess, in fact, on the deals front, the first thing probably would be the jet engine deal, because it's almost there. We're actually now just signing up, finalizing the last bit of commercial terms of the agreement, likely in the next 3 to 4 months, literally. So it will be ready. That could be one of the big deals put forward for the two leaders to sign whenever is the first meeting. So that's something we can look forward to. And of course, there are a few other things like the armored vehicles, etc., for which, again, technology, what we spoke about, the co-development, co-design, and co-production, rather. So those, actually, the discussions are on. So will the change in the administration have an impact on those nuances of the agreements? That we'll have to watch out. Because jet engine is almost more or less a done deal. So that might, and if you actually remember, when Trump was in India, we actually signed the deal, a couple of mega deals, including the Apache helicopters, when he was here. So yeah, I guess those high-profile deals will always be there, especially, as Kallol pointed out, the show and pomp of the visits. I guess these will be the symbolic or some of the big agenda items to show that we have done something during visits. I think those will remain.
And as you said, the important thing to keep a very close eye on is what is the price that Trump 2.0 will extract, as opposed to perhaps more magnanimous previous administration. Kallol, I want to bring up that business issue because in the last Trump tenure, one of the areas where there was a lot of disquiet in India was the kind of very public hectoring Mr. Trump did about India's position on tariff barriers. The withdrawal of the GSP status was a shock for months. Actually, India thought that they would be able to bring back somehow, get that status back. That didn't work out, and of course, the Democratic era did not see it either. We've also seen deals like Mr. Trump had forged with Prime Minister Modi in Houston for LNG gas that India was supposed to have taken a stake in an American LNG company. That also going by the wayside. The FTA agreements between the two, whatever the two sides had discussed on having some kind of a free trade agreement, also shelved by the time the Biden administration came to power. When it comes to business in particular, where do you think India and the US are going to have to start work?
Well, I think, first of all, they will have to work on dealing with the business domain separate from what the Biden administration, and of course, before it, the Obama administration termed as the Indo-Pacific strategy. Because if you look at the Indo-Pacific strategy in the last 4 years of Biden administration, the business interest and everything else were basically getting coalesced into this wider Indo-Pacific strategy. It brought in the medical diplomacy, it brought in business diplomacy, it brought everything else into it. But whereas, when we remember how Trump dealt with India was that it was deal by deal. It was like one mega deal after the other, and in every deal, Donald Trump had to win. So I think, we are going to see some very unique technology initiatives that are the proposals that are going to come from this Trump administration, because this is really the height of the big tech that India is going to witness now, because we already have got very big tech players in the Indian market. And obviously, there will be resistance from these very big tech entities in the Indian market. But then there will be the real diplomacy and power play when people like Elon Musk and others who are in the Trump team already, when they acquire a formal position and they start pushing for accessing the tech market of India, which is really one of the largest markets right now. And how will the Indian decision makers respond to those pressures and those initiatives from the Trump 2.0, because that is really going to be the coin of international power politics in 2025 onwards. And that is going to be AI and more AI. And people like, Elon Musk, after all the muscular victory that they have got through Donald Trump, will be very reluctant to surrender in those fronts when it comes to a quote-unquote friendly country as India. But I would say that before going into the business deals, they will have to sort of iron out a few bureaucratic wrinkles that have emerged on the India-US relationship in the last few months, if you may say so. And most importantly, these issues of secret agents doing things in the United States, and these little disagreements. These are essentially bureaucrats fighting with each other, and then thereafter leaving a very negative imprint on the overall relationship. So if you have excellent political relation at the top level, perhaps these sort of little irritants. I mean, I'm calling them little, though perhaps they are not little as they indicate much bigger issues.
There is a trial in the Panun case, which will begin sometime this year. And whether or not Mr. Trump wants to make an issue of it, and I don't think Mr. Biden will either, we are likely to see that trial continue and see some kind of, an ongoing conversation over this, although it has been settled with the US in a way it hasn't been settled with Canada. Very, very interesting points that you brought up over there, Kallol, particularly the question So much has changed in 4 years, whether it is tech, whether it is this the Panun case, whether it is so much else in the India-US relationship. Will Trump 2.0 be a huge shift from Trump 1.0 or not? We'll certainly keep tracking all the developments for you here at The Hindu. Thanks for joining us, Kallol, and to all our other panelists and guests on the show here. And we'll come back from the team at Hindu. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.